Hey, Cerendi here. It's been a long time since I uploaded a story, but I'm back now with a new one. This is What If Bellcranel Can See the Future. Hit like and subscribe if you want more of this kind of stories. Leave a comment if you have suggestions, so let's start.
I am the ghost of the Uchiha.
The first time it happened, Bellcranel thought he was dreaming. He'd been walking along a forest path toward Irregular, his grandfather's tales of heroes filling his mind, when suddenly the world around him blurred. For a heartbeat, Bell wasn't on the path anymore, but standing before massive gates, watching as a tiny goddess with black hair tied in twin tails smiled up at him. "I accept you," she had said, her blue eyes shining with kindness. "You'll be my first familia member." Then, as quickly as it had come, the vision vanished. Bell stood frozen on the forest path, heart hammering in his chest. It had felt so real, the weight of the pack on his shoulders, the smell of the city, the goddess's voice. But that was impossible. He hadn't even reached Irregular yet, let alone met any deities. Bell shook his head and continued walking, dismissing it as an overactive imagination fueled by years of his grandfather's stories. 3 days later, when he stood before those exact gates he'd seen in his vision, Bell couldn't dismiss it anymore. And when, after being rejected by every familia he approached, a small goddess with black twin tails smiled up at him in an underground church and said those exact words, "I accept you. You'll be my first familia member." Bellcranel knew something extraordinary had happened to him. He could see fragments of the future. Bellcun, wake up." Bell's eyes snapped open to find goddess Hestia leaning over him, her blue eyes wide with concern. He sat up quickly, nearly bumping foreheads with her. "You were muttering in your sleep again," she said, settling back on her heels. "Another vision," Bell nodded, trying to organize the jumbled images in his mind. "The dungeon. Second floor, there's going to be a goblin ambush behind a rock formation shaped like a crescent moon." He rubbed his temples. "5 of them, I think," Hestia frowned. "Maybe you should skip the dungeon today." "I can't avoid it forever, goddess," Bell smiled reassuringly. "Besides, now I know it's coming." It had been 2 weeks since Bell had confessed his ability to Hestia. At first, she'd been skeptical, but after he'd accurately predicted 3 minor events around their home, from a leak in the ceiling to the exact words of the vendor who sold them potatoes, she'd become a believer. "Just be careful," Hestia said, moving to prepare breakfast. "And remember what we discussed. This ability of yours is not something to share with others," Bell finished. "I know, goddess." They had agreed that Bell's foresight was dangerous knowledge. If word spread that the lone member of the Hestia familia could glimpse the future, he would become a target for every familia in Irregular. Some would want to recruit him, others to eliminate the threat he represented, and the most dangerous would seek to use him for their own ambitions. Bell dressed quickly in his light armor, securing the small knife that was his only weapon. His status had grown impressively in the past 2 weeks, faster than Hestia had ever heard of for a new adventurer. Bell suspected his ability played a role in this accelerated growth. Knowing where monsters would attack gave him opportunities to prepare perfect counters, making his victories seem more impressive than they were. "I'll be back before dinner," Bell promised, heading for the door. "Bellcun," Hestia called, making him pause. "Have you seen anything else, anything significant?" Bell hesitated. The truth was he had. For 3 nights now, he'd dreamed of golden hair and golden eyes, of a woman moving like the wind through monsters that fell before her blade. The sword princess, Eyes Wallenstein. In his vision, she saved him from a minotaur that had escaped to the upper floors. "Nothing important," he lied, giving Hestia a bright smile, "just the usual dungeon stuff." He couldn't tell her that he'd also seen himself running away, humiliated and covered in minotaur blood. Or that despite this foreknowledge, some inexplicable instinct told him he needed to let this encounter happen exactly as foreseen. That was the strangest part of his new ability. Sometimes his visions came with a certainty that altering them would be worse than letting them unfold naturally. As Bell made his way toward the dungeon, he contemplated the nature of his power. The visions came in 3 ways. Dreams while sleeping, sudden flashes while awake, and occasionally, deliberate glimpses when he concentrated on a specific person or decision. The last type was the weakest and most unreliable, often showing him multiple possible outcomes that left him more confused than enlightened. The clearest visions were the ones that seemed most important, as if fate itself wanted certain events to unfold and was using Bell as its instrument. "Good morning, Bellcun," called Ina Tool from the guild counter as he entered. Starting early today? Yes, Miss Ina, Belle replied with a smile. I thought I'd try to reach the third floor today. Ina's expression grew serious. Be careful. The jump from second to third floor presents new challenges. The monsters get stronger and the layout changes more frequently, Belle finished, then immediately regretted it when Ina raised an eyebrow. Been studying the dungeon manuals I gave you? I'm impressed, Belle laughed nervously. Just trying to be prepared. In truth, he'd seen the third floor in his dreams, its winding passages and the small pack of kobolds that patrolled its western corridor. He'd also seen 3 different paths he might take, though which one he would actually encounter remained unclear. That was another limitation of his ability. The further into the future he saw, the more possibilities branched out, making the visions less reliable. Immediate futures, events within the next few hours, were usually accurate. Anything beyond a day became increasingly uncertain. As Belle headed down into the dungeon, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife as he descended past the first floor, carefully navigating the familiar passages. When he reached the crescent-shaped rock formation from his vision, Belle didn't hesitate. Instead of passing between the rocks as most adventurers would, he climbed atop them and waited. Sure enough, 5 goblins emerged from hiding spots, looking confused when they found no prey in their ambush zone. From his vantage point, Belle picked them off one by one, his knife finding vital points with precision that would have been impossible without his foreknowledge of exactly where each goblin would move. As the last goblin fell, Belle hopped down to collect the magic stones. This was becoming routine: see the threat in advance, counter it perfectly, collect the rewards. It made dungeon crawling safer but also strangely hollow. Where was the heroism in victories that were predetermined? Belle pocketed the stones and continued deeper, wondering if this gift was truly a blessing or merely a shortcut that would prevent him from becoming the hero he had always dreamed of being. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the trembling of the ground beneath his feet, a warning sign he hadn't foreseen. Belle froze, listening intently, then heard it. The heavy breathing and thunderous footsteps of something much larger than a goblin. His eyes widened in realization. This was it, the minotaur from his vision. It wasn't supposed to be here yet. He shouldn't encounter it until later, when eyes would be present to save him. Belle drew his knife with trembling hands as a horrifying thought struck him. What if his actions had already changed the future? What if, by avoiding the goblin ambush instead of fighting through it as he might have originally, he'd arrived at this junction early? What if Eyes wasn't coming to save him this time? The minotaur rounded the corner, its massive form filling the narrow dungeon passage, red eyes fixing on the young adventurer who represented its first taste of freedom since being driven upward from the deeper floors. Cranel, the boy who could see the future, suddenly faced a terrifying realization. Sometimes, knowing what might happen changes what will happen, and sometimes those changes could be fatal. The minotaur bellowed, its roar shaking dust from the dungeon ceiling. Belle's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet remained frozen to the spot. This wasn't right. In his vision, he'd been with other adventurers when the minotaur appeared. The monster had been fleeing something or someone. The pieces clicked together in Belle's mind. The timing was wrong because the minotaur wasn't being chased yet. He'd arrived too early in this part of the dungeon. Belle finally broke from his paralysis and turned to flee just as the minotaur charged. He sprinted down the corridor, heart pounding against his ribs. The dungeon passages blurred around him as he ran faster than he'd ever run before. Someone, anyone, he shouted, hoping other adventurers might hear him. But the second floor was sparsely populated this early in the morning. Belle rounded a corner and skidded to a halt as his surroundings suddenly matched exactly what he'd seen in his vision. The wide chamber with 3 passages leading off it, the scattered remains of adventurers' equipment, and most importantly, the sound of combat from the corridor to his right. A heartbeat later, the minotaur burst into the chamber behind him. Belle dove aside, narrowly avoiding being trampled. The monster skidded, then turned toward him with murderous intent. This way, Belle's head snapped toward the voice. A group of adventurers he didn't recognize was waving frantically from one of the passages. The low-key familia, exactly as he'd foreseen, but something was different. In his vision, he'd been running covered in minotaur blood, utterly humiliated. Now, though terrified, he was still standing his ground. The minotaur charged again. Belle's foresight kicked in with crystal clarity, not a vision of the future, but instinctive knowledge of exactly where the monster would strike. He sidestepped, his knife slashing across the minotaur's arm as it passed. It was a superficial wound, barely a scratch to the massive creature, but it was something. The minotaur roared in fury and whirled to face him again. That's when she appeared. Eyes Wallenstein entered the chamber like a golden whirlwind, her blade flashing in the dim dungeon light. The sword princess moved with inhuman speed, dancing around the minotaur as if it were standing still. Belle watched in awe as she dispatched the monster with a single devastating strike. One moment the minotaur was charging, the next it burst into ash, leaving only a magic stone behind. The chamber fell silent. Belle stared at Eyes, her golden eyes meeting his crimson ones. In his vision, he'd been paralyzed by admiration and shame. Now, despite his racing heart, he managed to straighten and offer a shaky bow. "Thank you for saving me," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. Eyes tilted her head slightly, studying him with curiosity. "You didn't run away." I couldn't." Belle realized it was true. Despite his fear, something had kept him from fleeing, perhaps the knowledge that this moment was important, that it needed to happen, just not exactly as he'd foreseen. A tall werewolf approached, eyeing Belle critically. "Not bad, kid. Most level ones would have been Minotaur Chow." "Bite," Eyes admonished softly. Belle recognized the werewolf from his visions, Bite Loga, one of the Loki familia's top fighters. In the original vision, Bite had mocked him mercilessly for running away covered in Minotaur blood. "What? I'm complimenting him," Bite said with a shrug. "Still, you should stick to the upper floors, kid." "You got lucky today," Belle nodded, understanding that some things would happen regardless of his foreknowledge. Bite Loga would always look down on lower-level adventurers. Eyes Wallenstein would always be quiet and enigmatic. But some things had changed. He hadn't run away in panic. He'd managed to wound the Minotaur, however slightly. The timeline had shifted. "I'll be more careful," Belle promised, collecting himself. "Thank you again." As the Loki familia departed, with Eyes giving him one last curious glance, Belle felt a strange mix of emotions. His visions weren't absolute. The future wasn't fixed. His actions could change what was to come, for better or worse. For the first time since discovering his ability, Belle felt both the weight of its responsibility and the liberation of knowing he wasn't merely following a predetermined script. "You did what?" Hestia's voice echoed through their small home beneath the church. Belle winced. "I didn't exactly fight the Minotaur, goddess. I just didn't run away immediately." "A Minotaur is a mid-level monster. You could have been killed," Hestia paced frantically, her twin tails swinging with each turn. "But I wasn't," Belle said softly. "And something important happened today. I realized my visions aren't absolute. I can change things." Hestia stopped pacing and studied him. "What do you mean?" Belle explained how the encounter had differed from what he'd foreseen, how by changing his actions, the outcome had changed as well. "That's both reassuring and terrifying," Hestia sighed, sitting beside him. "It means you're not bound to some fixed destiny, but it also means your foresight isn't foolproof protection." "I think that's a good thing," Belle said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "What kind of hero would I be if my path was already decided, if victory was guaranteed?" Hestia smiled, ruffling his white hair affectionately. "You're growing up, Belkun." Her expression turned serious. "But promise me you'll still be careful. Use your gift to avoid unnecessary risks, not to take bigger ones." "I promise," Belle nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure he could keep that promise. Something had awakened in him today, a sense that his ability wasn't meant to make his journey easier, but to guide him toward the moments that mattered most. That night, as Belle drifted to sleep, new visions came to him. A silver-haired supporter with clever eyes, a massive party of adventurers in the 18th floor, a black-armored figure wielding corruption like a weapon, and throughout them all the golden-haired sword princess, somehow central to his path. Belle smiled in his sleep. The future held challenges, but for the first time since arriving in Arario, he felt like a true adventurer, uncertain of what lay ahead but eager to face it nonetheless. Word of Belle's encounter with the Minotaur spread quickly through Arario's adventurer community. The tale grew with each retelling until people were claiming the white-haired rookie had stood his ground against the monster, even landing a blow before the sword princess intervened. Belle found himself the subject of curious glances and occasional whispers as he made his guild submissions. Even Ina seemed to look at him differently. "Belkun, are you sure you're ready for the third floor?" she asked during their regular advisory session. "After yesterday's incident, I'm sure," Belle interrupted gently. "Actually, I was thinking of going to the fourth floor." Ina's eyes widened. "Absolutely not, you've only been an adventurer for 2 weeks." Belle couldn't explain that he'd already seen the fourth floor in his dreams, knew exactly where the dangerous monster parties gathered and where the safe routes lay. Instead, he nodded respectfully. "You're right, Miss Ina, I'll stick to the third floor for now." "Good," Ina looked relieved. "Now, about equipment, that knife isn't going to be sufficient much longer. Have you considered?" A vision flashed before Belle's eyes. A shop with a sign shaped like an anvil, a tall, red-haired god with a boisterous laugh, and a knife with a distinctive hilt. "Visiting some of the blacksmith shops," Ina finished, not noticing Belle's momentary distraction. "Yes," Belle said, blinking back to the present. "Actually, I think I know just the place." After leaving the guild, Belle followed the path his vision had shown him. Sure enough, he found himself standing before a shop called Hephaestus Familia Workshop. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. The interior was warm from forge fires, the walls lined with weapons of every description. Belle marveled at craftsmanship far beyond anything he could afford. "Can I help you?" asked a gruff female voice. Belle turned to see a red-haired young woman with an eye patch watching him skeptically. She wasn't the god from his vision, but something told him he was in the right place. "I'm looking for a new weapon," Belle said. "Something better than this." He indicated his small knife. The woman, Welf Krazo, according to the name stitched on her smith's apron, assessed him with a practiced eye. "Budget." Belle named a figure that represented nearly all the volleys he'd saved from his dungeon expeditions. Welf nodded toward a rack of plain but well-crafted weapons. "These are within your range, solid craftsmanship, nothing fancy." Belle browsed the options, but none matched the distinctive weapon from his vision. As he was about to settle for a serviceable short sword, the shop door burst open. "Welf, how's my favorite smith today?" boomed a tall, muscular god with flame-red hair and a broad smile. "Lord Hephaestus," Welf acknowledged with a respectful nod, "just helping a customer." The god-goddess, Belle realized, despite her masculine appearance, turned curious eyes on Belle, a new adventurer. Interesting, something in her gaze made Belle wonder if she could see more than she let on. Many deities had unusual perceptions beyond mortal understanding. "Hestia familia," Belle introduced himself with a bow. "I'm looking for a weapon that will grow with me." Hephaestus raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious, Hestia's boy, are you?" She finally found herself a child. Before Belle could respond, the goddess moved to a locked cabinet behind the counter. She withdrew a key from around her neck and opened it, removing a knife with a white hilt and a blade that seemed to capture the forge light in unusual ways. "This might interest you," she said, presenting the weapon, the Hestia knife. "I made it on commission some time ago, but the client never claimed it. It's adaptive, it will grow stronger as its wielder does." Belle stared at the knife, recognizing it instantly from his vision. "How much?" Hephaestus named a sum that made Belle's heart sink. It was several times what he had available. I can't afford that," he admitted. "Perhaps we can arrange something," Hephaestus said, studying him intently. "A loan with Hestia as guarantor." Belle knew what this meant. His goddess would be indebted to Hephaestus. In his vision, he'd seen Hestia working tirelessly to pay off such a debt. But he'd also seen himself wielding this knife against threats far greater than goblins and kobolds. "I'll need to discuss it with my goddess," Belle said carefully. Hephaestus smiled. "Of course, tell Hestia I look forward to catching up. It's been too long since we've talked." As Belle left the shop, knifeless but with new purpose, he considered how differently the encounter had played out compared to his vision. He hadn't simply accepted the knife and the debt it represented. He'd chosen to consult Hestia first, potentially altering another future event. The power to change what he foresaw was both liberating and concerning. If he could change small things so easily, what about the greater dangers he'd glimpsed? The corrupted adventurers, the monster outbreaks, the black-armored figure. Belle clutched his current knife, resolve hardening within him. He would use his gift not just to protect himself, but to shape a better future for everyone he cared about, starting with ensuring Hestia understood exactly what she'd be agreeing to if she became his guarantor. Over the next 2 weeks, Belle's adventures took on a new dimension. With Hestia's blessing and her agreement to work off the substantial debt to Hephaestus, Belle acquired the Hestia knife. The weapon felt perfect in his hand, as if it had been waiting for him. His expeditions into the dungeon grew more productive as he refined his use of foresight. Rather than relying entirely on his visions, Belle began using them as guidelines, a framework within which he could make his own choices. When he foresaw a kobold pack around a corner, he would sometimes deliberately take a different route. When he anticipated a fallen adventurer in need of help, he would prepare a spare potion to offer them. His status continued to grow at a remarkable rate, fueled by both his success in combat and his developing sense of heroism. Today, Belle descended to the 5th floor for the first time. His visions had shown him this level's distinctive blue moss and the increased danger of its monsters, but experiencing it firsthand was different. The chill air raised goosebumps on his arms as he carefully navigated the winding passages. A vision flashed through his mind, a small figure crouched behind a rock, trembling as killer ants skittered nearby. Bell adjusted his course immediately, heading toward where he knew he would find this person in need. Sure enough, as he rounded a corner, he spotted the killer ants first, 3 of them, their mandibles clicking as they searched for prey. Bell dispatched them efficiently, the hestia knife slicing through their carapaces with surprising ease. "Hello," he called softly once the monsters were defeated. "It's safe to come out now." A small, hooded figure peered out from behind a boulder. Large, intelligent eyes assessed Bell cautiously before the person emerged fully, a girl with chestnut hair and clothing that had seen better days. "You killed them," she said, her voice holding a note of surprise. "Are you hurt?" Bell asked, offering a hand. The girl shook her head, ignoring his outstretched hand and dusting herself off. "I'm fine, just miscalculated. Thank you for the assistance." Bell recognized her from his visions, the clever-eyed supporter who would play an important role in his journey, but something seemed off. In his foresight, their meeting had been different. "I'm Bellcranel, Hestia familia," he introduced himself, trying to get back to the script he'd foreseen. "Lilaruka ard, soma familia," she replied, studying him with calculation that seemed premature for their first meeting. "You're new to the dungeon." It wasn't a question, but Bell nodded anyway. "Relatively new, yes. Are you down here alone?" "My party abandoned me," Lily said with practiced resignation that pulled at Bell's heartstrings despite his knowledge that she wasn't being entirely truthful. "It happens to supporters." "That's terrible," Bell said sincerely. "Would you like to join me? Safety in numbers." Lily's eyes narrowed slightly as if suspicious of his easy offer. In Bell's vision, she had been the one to suggest partnering up as the first step in what would initially be a scheme to rob him. "Why would you want to team up with a stranger?" she asked cautiously. Bell smiled. "Because leaving you alone down here wouldn't be what a hero would do." Lily's expression flickered between skepticism and something softer before settling into a careful neutrality. "Very well. I can support you for today as thanks for saving me. My usual rate is 10% of magic stone proceeds." "How about 20%?" Bell offered, remembering from his vision that supporters were often underpaid and exploited. Lily's eyes widened slightly before she controlled her expression. "That's acceptable." As they began exploring together, Bell noted other differences from his foresight. Lily was more guarded, less quick to implement whatever scheme she'd been planning. Perhaps his unexpected rescue and generosity had disrupted her original intentions. By the end of the day, they had filled Lily's backpack with magic stones and item drops. Bell had deliberately shown her his fighting style, making it clear he was more capable than he might initially appear. "You're unusual, Bellcranel," Lily said as they prepared to return to the surface. "Most adventurers wouldn't have offered a stranger such favorable terms." "I believe in treating people fairly," Bell replied. "If you'd like to work together again tomorrow, I'd be glad for the company." Lily hesitated, an internal struggle visible in her eyes. Bell wished he could see what she was thinking, but his foresight showed him only physical events, not the thoughts behind them. "Same terms?" she finally asked. "Same terms," Bell confirmed with a smile. As they parted at the Babel Tower, Bell felt cautiously optimistic. His friendship with Lily was beginning differently than he'd foreseen, but perhaps in a healthier way. By changing small details, rescuing her before she attempted to rob him, offering fair payment from the start, he might help her find a better path sooner. That night, Bell's dreams were filled with new visions. A tavern called the Hostess of Fertility, a gray-haired elf with sharp eyes. Lily, tears streaming down her face as she confessed something. And most disturbing of all, a massive irregular monster with one arm rampaging through the upper floors of the dungeon. Bell woke with a gasp, his heart pounding. The irregular monster, he'd seen it before in fragments of visions, but never so clearly. It would emerge soon, and many adventurers would be in danger. He needed to warn someone. But who would believe a rookie adventurer claiming to foresee a monster outbreak? And how could he explain such knowledge without revealing his ability? The question haunted Bell as he prepared for another day in the dungeon, his excitement about working with Lily again tempered by the knowledge of the danger that was coming. The partnership between Bell and Lilaruka progressed rapidly over the next week. Bell's consistent fair treatment began to wear down Lily's defenses, though he could sense she still had secrets. He never mentioned that he knew she was using transformation magic to appear as a palom rather than her true chinthrope form, waiting for her to trust him enough to reveal it herself. Their dungeon explorations grew more profitable as Bell pushed deeper, reaching the 7th floor. His status continued to increase at an extraordinary rate, drawing attention from other adventurers who noticed the rookie in white and blue venturing places that should have been beyond his abilities. Today, Bell had suggested they take a break from the dungeon to visit the city markets. He needed supplies, but more importantly, his visions had shown him that today was significant for another reason. The hostess of fertility, Lily asked skeptically as they stood before the tavern, "This place is for high-class adventurers, will stand out." "I've heard the food is worth it," Bell said, though in truth, he'd seen this place in his visions multiple times. Something important would happen here today, something involving a gray-haired elf waitress. The moment they entered, Belle's eyes were drawn to her, tall and elegant, with a controlled expression that didn't quite mask her sharp assessment of every patron. In his visions, he'd seen her fighting with extraordinary skill, wielding wind magic that sliced through enemies. "Welcome to the hostess of fertility," greeted a cheerful cat-girl waitress. "Table for two?" "Yes, please," Belle replied, following her to a small table near the wall. As they settled in, Bell noticed other adventurers he recognized from his visions, members of the Loki familia at one large table, including Eyes Wallenstein, who gave him a small nod of recognition. His heart skipped a beat at that acknowledgement, though he was learning to control his reactions better. "What's so special about this place?" Lily whispered, eyeing the expensive menu with concern. "My treat today," Bell assured her. "Consider it thanks for being such a good partner." Lily's cheeks colored slightly at the compliment. "You're a strange adventurer, Bell." Their meal arrived, delivered by the gray-haired elf who introduced herself as Ryu. Bell felt a jolt of recognition. This was Ryu Lion, though in his visions he had known her by another name as well. Something about her eyes suggested she had seen far more than her current waitress position would indicate. As they ate, Bell surreptitiously observed the tavern, waiting for whatever event had drawn him here. His answer came when the door burst open and a rowdy group of adventurers entered, already half-drunk and looking for trouble. "Hey, isn't that the rookie everyone's talking about?" one of them called, pointing at Bell. "The one who supposedly stood up to a minotaur?" Bell tensed, recognizing the pattern from his vision. These were members of the Soma familia, Lily's familia, and their arrival wasn't coincidental. Lily had shrunk in her seat, her face pale. "Bell, we should leave," she whispered urgently. "It's okay," Bell said quietly, though he knew what was coming. "I won't let them hurt you." Her eyes widened in surprise, but before she could respond, the adventurers approached their table. "Lily. There you are, you little thief," the largest one growled. "You've been holding out on us. Where's the tribute you owe to your familia members?" "I've paid everything I owe," Lily said, her voice small but firm. "Not enough," another one snapped. "And now you're wasting money eating in fancy places. Hand over your earnings or we'll take them." Bell stood slowly, positioning himself between Lily and the adventurers. "She's working with me now. Any problems you have should be directed to me," the leader scoffed. "Stay out of this, rookie. This is Soma familia business." "Lily is my supporter," Bell said, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet tavern. "I won't allow anyone to harass her." In his vision, this confrontation had escalated to violence, with Bell struggling against the stronger adventurers until Ryu intervened. But Bell had been preparing for this moment, and his status was higher now than it would have been in that original timeline. The leader moved to shove Bell aside, but Bell was ready. With speed that surprised even himself, he caught the man's wrist and redirected his momentum, sending him staggering backward. "I don't want trouble," Bell said calmly. The adventurers looked at each other uncertainly. They had expected an easy target, not someone who could move like that. From behind the bar, a massive woman with a scar, Mia Grand, the owner, called out, "Take your quarrels outside." "No fighting in my establishment," the leader of the Soma adventurers glared at Bell. "This isn't over, rookie, and you, Lily, watch your back. Lord Soma will hear about your betrayal." As they retreated, Bell sat back down, aware that every eye in the tavern was on him. He met Lily's stunned gaze. "How did you know?" she whispered. "About them, about me." "I notice things," Bell said gently, "and I meant what I said. You're my friend, Lily. I'll protect you." Tears welled in her large eyes. "You don't understand what you're getting into. The Soma familia, we're not like other familias, and I'm not who you think I am." "Then tell me," Bell encouraged. In that moment, watching Lily struggle between her ingrained distrust and her desperate desire to believe him, Bell understood why his foresight had brought him here today. Some moments weren't about avoiding danger, but about being present for the people who needed him. As Lily began to speak, haltingly revealing the truth about her past, her transformation magic, and the curse of Soma's wine, Belle listened with genuine compassion. This path, building trust instead of reacting to betrayal, felt right in a way his visions never had. From across the tavern, Rue Lion watched them with curious eyes, and Belle knew their paths would cross again soon. But for now, his focus was on Lily and the fragile trust she was placing in him. Unknown to either of them, a one-armed monster was slowly making its way toward the upper floors of the dungeon, drawn by an instinct it didn't understand toward a white-haired boy whose scent promised the completion it sought. The next morning, Belle awoke with a sense of foreboding. His dreams had been filled with chaos, adventurers fleeing in panic, the massive one-armed irregular cutting a path of destruction through the upper floors of the dungeon. The visions had been clearer than ever before, carrying a sense of immediate danger. Today was the day. The monster would emerge. Belle dressed quickly, strapping the hestia knife to his belt with grim determination. After Lily's confession at the tavern yesterday, they had agreed to meet at Babel Tower this morning to continue their dungeon exploration. But Belle knew they couldn't enter the dungeon today, not with what was coming. As he prepared to leave, Hestia stopped him with a concerned hand on his arm. "Belle-kun, what's wrong? You look troubled." Belle hesitated. He'd kept the details of his visions from Hestia lately, not wanting to worry her unnecessarily. But this was different. "I saw something bad, goddess," he admitted. "A dangerous monster coming to the upper floors today." Hestia's eyes widened. "Are you certain? What kind of monster?" "An irregular. Massive with one arm." Belle described the creature from his visions. "Many adventurers will be hurt if someone doesn't stop it." "Then you must stay away from the dungeon today," Hestia said firmly. "Promise me, Belle-kun." Belle looked into her worried eyes and found he couldn't make that promise. "I need to warn people. I need to help." "How will you explain knowing about this monster?" Hestia challenged. "If you reveal your ability, I'll find a way," Belle assured her. I can't ignore this, goddess, not when I might be able to save lives." Hestia studied him for a long moment before sighing in resignation. "Your heart is too big for your own good, Belle-kun." She reached up to touch his cheek. "Just be careful, come back to me." "I will," Belle promised, and he meant it. His visions had shown him multiple possible outcomes of today's events, and he was determined to guide things toward the best one. At Babel Tower, Lily was waiting with her supporter's backpack. After yesterday's revelations, she seemed lighter somehow, though still cautious. "Good morning, Belle," she greeted him. "Ready for the dungeon?" "About that," Belle said carefully. "I think we should avoid the dungeon today." Lily tilted her head curiously. "Why? The morning hours are best for avoiding crowds." "I have a bad feeling," Belle said, choosing his words deliberately. "I've heard rumors of unusual monster activity." "Rumors?" Lily's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "From who?" Before Belle could answer, a commotion near the dungeon entrance caught their attention. Guild officials were gathering, their expressions serious as they consulted in hushed tones. "Something's happening," Belle murmured, moving closer to listen. "Reports from the 10th floor," one official was saying, "an irregular moving upward rapidly. We need to issue a warning. Evacuate the upper floors immediately," another ordered. "Contact the Ganesha familia for assistance." Belle turned to Lily, whose face had paled. "It seems my feeling was right." "How did you know?" she asked, her voice hushed. "Intuition," Belle said, unable to meet her eyes directly. "Come on, we should help spread the warning." As they moved through the growing crowd, Belle spotted Ina emerging from the guild offices, her expression tense. "Ina-san," he called, waving to get her attention. The half-elf hurried over to them. "Belle-kun, you need to stay out of the dungeon today. We have an emergency situation." "I heard," Belle said. "An irregular monster is coming up from below. How can I help?" Ina looked taken aback by his knowledge and offer. "The best help would be staying safe. This is a job for experienced adventurers." "But people might still be in the dungeon," Belle insisted. "Lower-level adventurers who don't know the danger." Ina hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "We're short-staffed for the evacuation. If you could help spread the warning on the first floor only, but promise you'll retreat immediately if there's any sign of danger." "I promise," Belle said, though in his heart he knew he might not be able to keep that promise. His visions had shown him playing a role in today's events that went beyond simple warning delivery. With Ina's official authorization, Belle and Lily entered the dungeon alongside guild staff and members of various familias who had volunteered to assist with the evacuation. The first floor was busier than usual, with adventurers retreating from deeper levels, responding to the initial warnings. "I don't like this," Lily muttered as they moved through the corridors, alerting smaller parties of the danger. "Something feels wrong. How did you really know about this, Belle?" Belle paused, considering how much to reveal. Lily had trusted him with her secrets, perhaps it was time to trust her with one of his. Sometimes I see things before they happen, he said quietly. Not everything, not clearly, but enough to know we were in danger today. Lily stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, suspicion, and finally understanding. That's how you knew about me, about the Soma Familia members at the tavern, Belle nodded. I've only told my goddess, it's not something I want others to know. Because they would use you, Lily said with the weary knowledge of someone who had been used all her life. Just like they use me for my transformation magic. Exactly, Belle confirmed, relieved that she understood. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant roar that echoed through the dungeon passages, followed by screams of terror. The irregular had reached the upper floors sooner than expected. We need to go, Lily urged, tugging at Belle's arm. Now, Belle, but Belle stood frozen, a vision washing over him, a group of young adventurers cornered by the monster with no escape route. Among them, a small supporter with brown hair tied in twin tails, clutching a backpack similar to Lily's. There are people trapped, Belle said, blinking back to the present, near the western passage. Children, how do you, Lily began, then shook her head. Never mind, Belle, you can't face an irregular, even high-level adventurers struggle with them. I'm not planning to fight it, Belle assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain that was true. Just help the trapped adventurers escape, you should go to the surface. And leave you, Lily scoffed. After everything you've done for me, no chance, Belle. The determination in her eyes warmed Belle's heart but also filled him with concern. His visions hadn't been clear about Lily's fate in this encounter. The futures he'd seen branched too many ways. Stay behind me, he finally said, and run if I tell you to run. No arguments. They hurried through the increasingly deserted corridors, guided by Belle's foreknowledge. The sounds of destruction grew louder, crashing stone, monstrous roars, and the occasional scream. When they rounded the final corner, the scene matched Belle's vision perfectly. A party of 5 young adventurers, likely not even level 2, were backed against a dead end, facing the massive irregular. The creature was even more terrifying in person than in Belle's visions, twice the height of a minotaur, with bulging muscles, one massive arm, and a twisted face locked in a permanent snarl. We need a distraction, Belle whispered to Lily. When it's focused on me, guide them along that side passage. Belle, no, Lily began, but Belle was already moving. Hey, he shouted, waving his arms. Over here, the irregular turned with surprising speed for its size, its single red eye fixing on Belle with malevolent intelligence. Something in its gaze sent a chill down Belle's spine. This wasn't just any monster. It seemed to recognize him specifically. That hadn't been in his visions. The monster charged, its massive arms swinging in an arc that would have crushed Belle had he not anticipated the attack. He dove aside, rolling to his feet with the hestia knife drawn. Now, Lily, he called. As Lily darted toward the trapped adventurers, Belle kept the monster's attention with quick movements and shallow cuts whenever it came within range. He wasn't trying to defeat it, just buy time. The irregular roared in frustration as Belle evaded another attack, its fists smashing into the dungeon wall and sending cracks spiderwebbing through the stone. A vision flashed through Belle's mind, the ceiling collapsing, burying them all. Hurry, he shouted to Lily, who was ushering the last of the young adventurers toward safety. The monster charged again, but this time Belle saw an opportunity. One of his visions had shown him the irregular's weak point, a soft spot at the base of its neck where the skin pulsed with an inner light. As the creature lunged forward, Belle timed his move perfectly, leaping up and driving the hestia knife directly into that vulnerable point. The blade sank deep, drawing a howl of pain from the monster. For a moment, Belle thought he'd succeeded. Then the irregular's massive arm wrapped around him, crushing the breath from his lungs. The knife was still embedded in its neck, but the wound wasn't fatal. Belle, Lily screamed from the passage entrance. The young adventurers were safely behind her, their eyes wide with terror. Run, Belle gasped, struggling against the monster's grip. Get them out! As his vision began to darken from lack of oxygen, Belle had one last flash of foresight. Golden hair, a gleaming sword, and the sensation of falling. Then the dungeon wall exploded inward in a shower of stone and dust. Eyes Wallenstein stood in the newly created opening, her sword desperate glowing with wind magic. Behind her, members of the low-key familia poured into the chamber, including the werewolf Bete and a green-haired human with glasses. Reveria, Belle recognized from his visions. Release him, Eyes commanded, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. The irregular turned toward this new threat, still clutching Belle in its massive hand. Belle felt consciousness slipping away, but with his last strength, He pulled the hestia knife free from the monster's neck and plunged it directly into the red eye that had fixed on him with such strange recognition. The monster howled, its grip loosening just enough for Bell to slip free. He fell to the ground as Eyes launched herself forward, her blade a blur of motion as it severed the irregular's massive arm. Bell's last thought before darkness claimed him was that the future wasn't fixed after all. In none of his visions had he managed to strike the killing blow himself. As consciousness faded, he heard Lily calling his name and felt gentle hands lifting him from the dungeon floor. The world went black. Bell awoke to the smell of herbs and clean linen. He blinked, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling above him. This wasn't his small room beneath the church. "Bell Kun," Hestia's relieved voice came from beside him. "You're awake." Bell turned his head to see his goddess, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. "Goddess," he croaked, his throat dry. "What happened?" "You nearly got yourself killed, that's what happened," Hestia said, though her scolding tone was undermined by the way she clutched his hand. "Fighting an irregular, what were you thinking?" Memories flooded back, the monster, the trapped adventurers, Lily's terrified face, and Iza's timely arrival. "Where am I?" Bell asked, trying to sit up. "The Diane Sect Familia Healing Center," came another voice. Bell looked over to see Lily entering the room, carrying a tray with a pitcher of water. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days?" Bell asked, then winced as pain shot through his ribs. "Don't try to move too quickly," Lily advised, pouring him a glass of water. "You had 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and numerous other injuries. The healers said you're lucky to be alive." Bell accepted the water gratefully, taking small sips. "The others, the adventurers we rescued. All safe," Lily assured him. "Thanks to you," her expression softened. "You saved their lives, Bell, and mine." "The irregular?" Bell asked. "Defeated," Hestia said. "The Loki familia finished it off after you stabbed it in the eye." Her voice held a mixture of pride and lingering fear. "The whole city is talking about it. The rookie who wounded an irregular and saved a party of adventurers." Bell closed his eyes, processing this information. His actions had altered the outcome he'd foreseen. In his visions, the irregular had caused much more destruction before being defeated, and several adventurers had died. By intervening early, guided by his foresight but not bound by it, he'd changed that future. "There's something else you should know," Lily said, her tone cautious. "The guild is calling it the one-armed black Goliath. They're saying it was a rare variant of a monster from much deeper in the dungeon." But what?" Bell prompted when she hesitated. "The way it focused on you," Lily said. "Like it knew you. I've never seen a monster act that way." Bell hadn't shared those particular visions with anyone, the fragments he'd seen of a connection between himself and the irregular. In his dreams, he'd sometimes heard a voice calling his name from the dungeon depths, though he hadn't understood its significance until now. "I don't know why it targeted me," Bell said truthfully. While he'd seen the monster's focus on him in his visions, he didn't know the reason behind it. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A Diane Sect healer entered, followed by a familiar half-elf. "Bell Kun," Ina exclaimed, her professional demeanor cracking as she rushed to his bedside. "Thank the gods you're awake. When they brought you in, I thought—" She stopped herself, composing her features. "The guild needs your statement about the irregular incident." "Can't it wait?" Hestia protested. "He's just woken up." "It's okay, goddess," Bell assured her. "I feel well enough to talk." As Bell recounted the events, carefully editing out any mention of his foresight, he noticed Ina's thoughtful expression. "You knew exactly where those adventurers were trapped," she said when he finished. "How did you find them so quickly?" "I heard their calls for help," Bell improvised. "The dungeon passages can carry sound strangely sometimes." Ina didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Well, however you found them, you saved their lives. The guild officially recognizes your actions during the crisis. There will be a reward, of course." After Ina left, promising to return the next day to check on him, Bell sank back against his pillows, exhausted from the conversation. "You need rest," Hestia declared, standing up. "Lily and I will let you sleep." "Wait," Bell said, catching Lily's sleeve as she turned to leave. "What happened with the Soma familia? Are they still looking for you?" Lily's expression darkened. "They are. But I've been staying at an inn, changing my appearance regularly. I'll be fine." Bell frowned. In his visions, Lily's problems with the Soma familia had eventually been resolved through a direct confrontation with Lord Soma himself. But that was still in the future, and the path to that moment remained unclear. "Stay with us," Bell suggested impulsively. "At the church, it's not much, but you'd be safer." Lily glanced at Hestia, who nodded after only a moment's hesitation. "Any friend of Bell Kun's is welcome," the goddess said, "especially one who helped save his life." As they left him to rest, Bell closed his eyes, new visions already forming behind his eyelids. The future had shifted again, branching in directions he hadn't foreseen before. Some dangers had been avoided, but others loomed, a war game against a powerful familia, a festival that would end in chaos, and always in the deepest shadows of his precognition, that black-armored figure whose face he could never quite see. But for now, Bell allowed himself to rest, knowing that whatever futures awaited him, he wouldn't face them alone. The story of Cranel's confrontation with the one-armed black Goliath spread through Irregular like wildfire. Details grew with each retelling, transforming Bell from a rookie adventurer into a legendary hero who had faced down the monster single-handedly. By the time Bell was released from the healing center a week later, he could barely walk through the city without being recognized. "This is ridiculous," Bell muttered as another group of children asked him to recount the tale. "I didn't do anything special." "You stabbed an irregular in the eye while it was crushing you to death," Lily reminded him dryly. "Most people would consider that special." They were making their way through the marketplace, restocking supplies after their long absence from the dungeon. Bell's ribs were still tender, but the Diane sect healers had done remarkable work. Another week of rest and he would be cleared to resume adventuring. "Bell!" The soft voice made Bell turn. Eyes Wallenstein stood a few paces away, her golden eyes studying him with that same quiet intensity he remembered from their previous encounters. "Miss Wallenstein," Bell greeted her, managing not to stammer. His feelings for the Sword Princess remained complicated, admiration mixed with a strange sense of destiny that his visions had never fully clarified. "You're recovered," she observed. "Mostly," Bell confirmed. "Thank you for your help with the irregular without the Loki familia's intervention." "You wounded it first," Eyes said simply. "That was impressive." Coming from the Sword Princess, this was extraordinary praise. Bell felt his cheeks warm despite himself. "Lucky strike," he demurred. Eyes shook her head slightly. "Not luck. You knew where to hit it." Her gaze was penetrating, as if trying to see past his modest exterior to the truth beneath. "How did you know?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Bell met her eyes steadily, seeing in them not suspicion but genuine curiosity. "Instinct," he said finally. "In that moment it just seemed right." Eyes considered this answer, then nodded once. "Your instincts are good," she hesitated, then added, "When you return to the dungeon, be careful. Rumors are spreading about you." "Rumors?" Bell asked, though he had a good idea what she meant. His visions had shown him the attention his rapid growth would attract. "Some say your growth is unnatural," Eyes explained. "That you have a rare skill or blessing, it makes people curious. Sometimes dangerous." "I'm just trying to become stronger," Bell said truthfully. Something in his voice must have resonated with Eyes because her expression softened slightly. "I understand that desire." She glanced at Lily, who was watching their interaction with undisguised interest, then back to Bell. "When you're fully recovered, would you like to train together?" Bell blinked in surprise. In his visions, their training had come much later, after several more encounters. Once again, his actions were accelerating the timeline he'd foreseen. "I would be honored," he said sincerely. With a small nod, Eyes departed, leaving Bell staring after her with a mixture of confusion and excitement. "The Sword Princess herself offering to train you," Lily remarked, eyebrows raised. "Your reputation must be even bigger than I thought." Bell shook his head. "It's not about reputation, I think she's curious." "About what?" Lily asked. "About how I'm growing so quickly," Bell said carefully. "About how I knew where to strike the irregular." Lily's expression grew serious. "Your ability, you think she suspects something?" "Not specifically," Bell assured her, "but she knows there's more to me than meets the eye." They continued through the market in thoughtful silence. Bell's mind was racing, trying to reconcile the future he'd glimpsed with the reality that was unfolding. His visions had shown him becoming stronger under Eyes' guidance, but also facing increasing scrutiny from powerful figures in Irregular. As they passed a flower seller, Bell noticed a tall, silver-haired woman watching him from across the street. Her beauty was extraordinary, almost supernatural, and her gaze held an intensity that made him shiver involuntarily. "Bell," Lily asked, noticing his distraction. "What's wrong?" By the time Bell looked back, the woman had vanished into the crowd. "Nothing," he said, though he knew better. That had been Freya, the goddess whose interest in him featured prominently in his darker visions. The pieces were moving faster now, drawn by his growing reputation. Bell knew he needed to prepare for what was coming, not just physically, but strategically. His foresight was a powerful tool, but as he'd learned with the irregular, knowing the future didn't always mean controlling it. That night in the small church basement he called home, Bell sat with Hestia as she updated his status. His growth continued to astonish her. Bell-kun, this is unprecedented, she said, staring at the hieroglyphs on his back. You're approaching level 2 already, in just over a month. Bell didn't respond immediately. He was focused on a vision that had been recurring with increasing clarity, a massive man with a cruel smile looming over a fallen Hestia. The Apollo familia crest was visible on his armor. Goddess, Bell said carefully as Hestia finished the update, what do you know about the Apollo familia? Hestia looked surprised by the question. Apollo. He's one of the more powerful gods in Irregular. His familia is large and well established. Why do you ask? Just curious, Bell said, pulling his shirt back on. I've been hearing names of different familias in the city. Hestia's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Bell-kun, have you seen something? About Apollo? Bell hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. They're going to target us, soon. Why would they? Hestia asked, alarm evident in her voice. Because of me, Bell admitted. Because I'm growing too quickly, attracting too much attention. He'll want to add me to his collection. Hestia's expression hardened with uncharacteristic anger. He can't have you. You're my familia, my Bell-kun. I know, goddess, Bell said, touched by her fierce protectiveness. But we need to be prepared. Apollo isn't the type to take no for an answer. In his visions, the conflict with Apollo had resulted in a war game, a formal contest between familias with his freedom as the prize. Bell had seen fragments of the battle, enough to know it would be brutally difficult but winnable under the right circumstances. What should we do? Hestia asked, suddenly looking small and vulnerable. Bell reached out to take her hand. We need allies, and I need to get stronger faster. They talked long into the night, making plans and contingencies. Bell shared more of his visions than he had in weeks, feeling it was necessary now that multiple futures were converging. Hestia listened with growing concern but also determination. We'll face whatever comes together, she promised as they finally prepared for sleep. You're not alone in this, Bell-kun. I know, goddess, Bell said, smiling despite the weight of foreknowledge. That's what gives me hope. As he drifted toward sleep, new visions began to form, a castle on a hill, a smith with crimson hair forging armor for him, and most surprisingly, a young goddess with hair as white as his own, reaching out with a gentle smile. The future remained in flux, shaped by his choices and the ripples they created. But for the first time since discovering his ability, Bell felt not burdened by his foresight, but empowered by it. Whatever came next, he would be ready. In the weeks that followed, Bell's life took on a new rhythm. Mornings were spent in the dungeon with Lily, carefully building his experience and gathering magic stones to fund their preparations. Afternoons were dedicated to training, sometimes with Eyes, who pushed him to his limits with her quiet intensity, and sometimes alone, refining techniques he'd glimpsed in visions of his future self. Evenings were for strategy. Hestia had taken his warnings about Apollo seriously, using her connections among the deities to gather information discreetly. Lily contributed her knowledge of Irregular's underworld, painting a clearer picture of the power dynamics that would influence the coming conflict. Today, Bell had arranged to meet someone new, someone his visions had shown would be crucial to their future. A blacksmith, Lily asked skeptically as they approached the workshop on Central Street. We can't afford high-grade equipment yet. This one's different, Bell said confidently. Trust me. When they entered the workshop, the red-haired smith was arguing with a pair of adventurers. I don't care how much you're offering, he was saying heatedly. I won't make weapons with that ability. Find another smith. The adventurers departed with dark looks, brushing past Bell and Lily as they left. The smith sighed heavily, then noticed his new visitors. If you're here for magic weapons, you're out of luck, he said gruffly. I don't make them. Actually, Bell said, stepping forward, I'm looking for armor, something light but durable. And a partner, the smith raised an eyebrow. Partner? I'm bellcranel hestia familia, Bell introduced himself. And this is Lilaruka Ard, my supporter, your Welf Krazo, right? Of the Hephaestus familia, Welf's eyes narrowed suspiciously. How do you know my name? Your reputation precedes you, Bell said smoothly. It wasn't entirely a lie in his visions. Welf was renowned for his skill, though that reputation lay mostly in the future. I've heard you're the best with traditional smithing techniques. Flattery wasn't Bell's usual approach, but his visions had shown him that Welf's pride in his craftsmanship was both his weakness and his strength. Traditional is one way to put it, Welf said, though his expression had softened slightly. Most people these days only want magic weapons. I don't need magic, Bell said sincerely. Just quality I can depend on. Welf studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a workbench. Let's talk details. What exactly are you looking for? As they discussed armor specifications, Bell carefully steered the conversation toward a partnership. In his visions, Welf had joined their expeditions, providing on-site repairs and eventually becoming a trusted friend. "So you're suggesting I join you in the dungeon?" Welf clarified after Bell made his proposal. "As what exactly?" "As an equal partner," Bell said. "You'd get a full share of magic stones and drop items. In exchange, you'd maintain our equipment and provide backup in combat. And you'd get exclusive access to a Hephaestus smith," Welf noted shrewdly. "Not a bad deal for you. It's a good arrangement for everyone," Bell countered. "You get direct dungeon access for material gathering, we get reliable equipment, and we all benefit from increased safety in numbers." Welf rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected, Cranel." "Oh?" Bell asked, genuinely curious. "The rumors paint you as this innocent rookie who stumbled into fame by luck," Welf explained. "But you negotiate like someone who's been playing the game for years." Bell laughed nervously, aware he'd let too much of his foreknowledge influence his approach. "I just know what I want." "Clearly," Welf agreed, then extended his hand. "All right, I'll give this partnership a trial run, 1 week in the dungeon together. If it works out, we'll talk long-term." As they shook hands, Bell felt another piece of the future falling into place. With Welf's craftsmanship and combat abilities, their little group would be significantly stronger, an important factor given what was coming. Later that evening, as Bell returned to the church, he found Hestia waiting with an unusual expression, part worry, part excitement. "Bellcun, there you are," she greeted him. "We've been invited to a banquet." Bell's heart sank. This was it, the beginning of Apollo's move against them. In his visions, the banquet had been where Apollo first declared his interest publicly. "Who extended the invitation?" he asked, though he already knew. "Hephaestus, actually," Hestia said, surprising him. "It's some kind of gathering of deities and their familia representatives, quite prestigious to be included." Bell frowned. This didn't match his visions. In what he'd foreseen, Apollo had been the one to invite them directly. "When is it?" he asked, trying to reconcile this new information. "Tomorrow evening," Hestia said. "Formal attire required." "I'll need to borrow something appropriate." She studied his face. "You don't seem happy about this." "Just surprised," Bell admitted. "My visions showed something different." Hestia's expression grew serious. "Your ability isn't infallible, Bellcun. The future changes, especially when you take actions based on what you've seen." "I know," Bell said, recalling how differently the irregular monster incident had played out compared to his original visions. "We should still be cautious. Apollo will be there, won't he?" "Most likely," Hestia confirmed. "All the major deities attend these functions." Bell nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps this was better, being invited by Hephaestus rather than Apollo might change the dynamics of their encounter. It gave them a potential ally in a confrontation his visions had shown ending badly for the Hestia familia. "We'll go," he decided, "but we should be prepared for anything." As Bell prepared for bed that night, he concentrated, trying to glimpse visions of the upcoming banquet. The images came in fragments: Hestia arguing with Apollo, a wine glass deliberately spilled, and most concerning, a golden-haired adventurer with a cruel smile tracking Bell's movements throughout the evening. But there was something new as well. A goddess with silver hair watching the proceedings with calculating eyes, then speaking quietly to Hephaestus as she gestured toward Bell. The future was shifting again, influenced by actions Bell had taken based on his foreknowledge. The confrontation with Apollo was still coming, but the circumstances were changing. New players were entering the game. Bell closed his eyes, accepting that his gift wasn't perfect precognition, but rather glimpses of possibilities. The path forward would require more than just following a script he'd seen in visions. It would demand adaptability, courage, and faith in the bonds he was forming. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but Cranel was no longer the naive rookie who had arrived in Arario with dreams of heroism and no real plan. He was becoming something more, a young man who could see fragments of what might be, and had the heart to fight for a better future than the one fate had initially dealt him. With that thought comforting him, Bell drifted into sleep, his dreams filled not with prophetic visions for once, but with simple hope for what tomorrow might bring. The Hephaestus Familia mansion gleamed in the evening light, its architecture as elegant and precise as the weapons its members crafted. Bell adjusted his borrowed formal wear, a suit in midnight blue that Welf had somehow procured for him, and offered his arm to Hestia, who looked uncharacteristically regal in a gown of crimson and gold. "Remember the plan," Hestia murmured as they approached the entrance. "We stay together, avoid Apollo if possible, and leave early if things get tense." Bell nodded, though he knew from his visions that plans rarely survived contact with Aurario's divine society. Still, he felt more prepared than he would have without his foreknowledge. A servant announced them as they entered the grand ballroom. Lady Hestia and Bellcranel of the Hestia familia. Heads turned, conversations pausing as curious eyes assessed the goddess and her sole adventurer. Bell recognized many faces from his visions, deities whose paths would cross with his, adventurers who would become allies or adversaries. Hestia, a tall, red-haired goddess, approached with a warm smile. "You actually came. It's been too long." Hephaestus, Hestia greeted her old friend with a genuine smile. "Thank you for the invitation. And this must be your famous child," Hephaestus said, turning her shrewd gaze to Bell. "The rookie who wounded the one-armed black Goliath. Nice to see you again," Bell bowed respectfully. "The credit belongs to the Loki familia who actually defeated it. I merely survived long enough for them to arrive." "Modest," Hephaestus observed with approval. "A rare quality in successful adventurers." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful tonight, Bellcranel. Your reputation has attracted interest." Before Bell could ask what she meant, Hephaestus was drawn away by another deity, leaving him and Hestia at the edge of the gathering. "That was a warning," Hestia whispered, her grip tightening on Bell's arm. "Hephaestus doesn't give those lightly." Bell nodded, scanning the room. His gaze caught on a golden-haired deity surrounded by attractive adventurers, Apollo, exactly as he'd seen in his visions. The god hadn't noticed them yet, engrossed in conversation with a buxom goddess Bell recognized as Freya. "We should circulate," Bell suggested. "Being stationary makes us easier targets." As they moved through the crowd, Bell's senses were heightened, alert for the triggers he'd seen in his visions. He recognized the servant carrying the tray of wine that would be accidentally spilled on Hestia, and gently steered his goddess away from that collision course. They managed nearly an hour of careful navigation, speaking briefly with various deities but avoiding entanglements. Bell was beginning to hope they might escape the evening unscathed when a melodious voice spoke from behind him. "So this is the famous Bellcranel." Bell turned to find himself face to face with the silver-haired goddess from the marketplace, Freya, whose beauty was even more overwhelming up close. Her eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him, as if seeing something beneath his skin. "Lady Freya," Bell acknowledged with a respectful bow, fighting the instinctive unease her presence triggered. In his visions, Freya's interest in him had led to both protection and peril. "I've been watching your progress," Freya said, her voice like silk. "Most impressive. One might almost think you know exactly what you're doing." The words sent a chill down Bell's spine. Did she suspect his ability? "I'm still learning," Bell said carefully. "Aurario has been educational." Freya's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed. The city has a way of revealing one's true nature." She glanced at Hestia, who was watching their interaction with poorly concealed anxiety. "Your goddess is fortunate to have found such a unique child." "I'm the fortunate one," Bell replied sincerely. "Lady Hestia gave me a chance when no one else would." "How touching," came another voice, rich with amusement and something darker. Apollo had finally noticed them and now approached with his entourage. "The loyalty of a faithful child. A rare thing, wouldn't you agree, Freya?" "Quite rare," Freya agreed, though her tone suggested she found Apollo's interruption distasteful. "Apollo," Hestia said stiffly, moving closer to Bell's side. "Hestia, darling," Apollo greeted her with exaggerated warmth. "What a delight to see you attending society functions at last, and with your remarkable child, no less." Bell felt tension radiating from Hestia. In his visions, this was where things began to unravel, Apollo's interest becoming too overt to ignore. "We were just leaving, actually," Bell said, hoping to derail the confrontation. "So soon?" Apollo's smile hardened. "But we've barely had a chance to become acquainted. I've been most eager to meet the adventurer everyone is talking about." "Perhaps another time," Hestia suggested, her voice tight. Apollo's eyes narrowed slightly. "I must insist." In fact, he reached for a passing servant's tray, lifting a glass of wine. "A toast to new acquaintances and future arrangements." This was it, the moment from Bell's vision where Apollo would accidentally spill the wine on Hestia, creating a pretext for conflict. But before Apollo could complete the motion, Freya's hand touched his wrist lightly. "Such haste, Apollo," she chided, her voice carrying a subtle warning. "These gatherings are for building relationships, not forcing them." Apollo's expression flickered with annoyance, but even he wasn't bold enough to challenge Freya directly. "Merely being friendly," he demurred, lowering the glass. The moment of crisis passed, but Bell knew it was only delayed, not averted. Apollo's desire to acquire him for his familia had been clear in every vision of the future. If you'll excuse us, Belle said politely, Lady Hestia is tired, we should return home. Of course, Freya said before Apollo could object. It was a pleasure meeting you properly, bellcranel. I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other. As they made their graceful but hasty exit, Belle could feel Apollo's gaze burning into his back. Outside in the cool evening air, Hestia let out a long breath. That was close, she said. If Freya hadn't intervened, Apollo won't give up, Belle said grimly. This just delays the inevitable. But why did Freya help us? Hestia wondered, her brow furrowed. She's not known for altruism. Belle thought of his visions of Freya, her complex interest in him, her manipulations both for and against him. She has her own plans for me, he said softly. And they don't include me joining Apollo's familia. That's not reassuring, Hestia muttered. As they walked through Arario's lamplit streets, Belle's mind raced with possibilities. The confrontation with Apollo would come, but the circumstances had changed. Freya's intervention tonight was new, a ripple effect from actions Belle had taken based on his foreknowledge. We need to accelerate our preparations, Belle decided. Apollo will make his move soon and we need to be ready. Hestia nodded in agreement. What do you suggest? It's time to officially invite Welf to join our familia, Belle said. And Lily too, if she's willing to leave Soma. We need to build our strength quickly. His visions had shown him that the war game with Apollo would be a desperate affair, with Belle facing overwhelming odds. But those visions had been based on a Hestia familia consisting of just himself and his goddess. With Welf's craftsmanship and Lily's tactical mind, they might stand a better chance. I'll speak to them tomorrow, Hestia agreed. But Belcun, even with 3 adventurers, we'd be vastly outnumbered by Apollo's familia. Numbers aren't everything, Belle said with more confidence than he felt. And we may find other allies along the way. He thought of the green-haired supportive magic user his visions had shown joining them and the fierce warrior with the wyvern mount. The timeline was accelerating, but that might work in their favor if they could gather their future allies sooner. As they reached the church they called home, Belle paused, a sudden vision flashing before his eyes, Apollo's adventurers surrounding the building, flames licking at the wooden doors. Belcun, Hestia asked, noticing his distraction. We need to find a new headquarters, Belle said urgently, somewhere more defensible. Apollo's first move will be against our home. Hestia's eyes widened in alarm. When? Soon, Belle said, unable to pinpoint the exact timing. Very soon. That night, as Hestia slept fitfully, Belle sat awake, planning. His gift of foresight had shown him fragments of what might come, but the future was increasingly fluid, changed by his own actions and the interventions of others like Freya. One thing remained constant in all his visions, however, the war game with Apollo. It seemed some confrontations were inevitable, written into the fabric of fate itself. But the outcome of that conflict, that Belle was increasingly certain, would depend not on predetermined destiny, but on the choices he made and the bonds he formed in the days to come. Dawn found him still awake, watching the sunrise with determined eyes. Today, they would begin preparing for war. 3 days after the banquet, Belle's prediction came true. Apollo's familia made their move at dawn, surrounding the church with nearly 30 adventurers. Their leader, a level 3 named Hyacinthus, called out a formal challenge as Belle, Hestia, and Lily watched from a hidden vantage point nearby. Hestia familia, by order of Lord Apollo, surrender your member bellcranel or face the consequences. But the church stood empty. Following Belle's warning, they had quietly relocated to a small safe house provided by Hephaestus, moving their few possessions under cover of darkness. They look angry, Lily observed as the Apollo familia adventurers realized no one was responding to their challenge. They'll burn it down, Belle said grimly, having seen this outcome in his visions. To send a message. True to his prediction, after searching the empty church, Hyacinthus gave the order. Torches were thrown, and soon the small wooden structure was engulfed in flames. Our home, Hestia whispered, her eyes reflecting the growing blaze. Just a building, Belle reminded her gently. We're safe, and that's what matters. They retreated to the safe house, where Welf was waiting with his belongings. The smith had agreed to join the Hestia familia after hearing of Apollo's challenge, his sense of justice outraged by the larger familia's tactics. So it's official, Welf said as they gathered around a small table. They've declared war on us. Not officially, Hestia corrected. Burning our home was a provocation, but Apollo hasn't invoked a war game yet. He's hoping to pressure us into surrendering Belcun without formal proceedings. Which we won't do, Belle stated firmly. Of course not, Hestia agreed, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by steely determination. But we need a strategy. They outnumber us significantly, and their captain Hyacinthus is level 3. Bell nodded thoughtfully. We need to control the battlefield. In my vis, he caught himself. In my assessment, our best option is to force a formal war game. That would place limitations on how Apollo can use his numerical advantage. How do we do that? Lily asked. They've already attacked our home. What's to stop them from simply ambushing us in the city or the dungeon? We need to make a public stand, Bell said, something witnessed by enough people that Apollo will have no choice but to follow formal procedures. Welf raised an eyebrow. You want to deliberately confront them? That's risky. Calculated risk, Bell corrected. If we choose the time and place, we can control the narrative. His visions had shown multiple potential confrontations, but the one with the best outcome had taken place in a crowded marketplace with other familias present as witnesses. The public nature of the encounter had forced Apollo to invoke a formal war game rather than simply overwhelming them with numbers. The Hephaestus Familia is hosting a public exhibition tomorrow, Hestia said slowly. Many familias will attend to see the latest weapons and armor. Apollo will certainly send representatives. Perfect, Bell said. We'll make our appearance there. When Apollo's people try to capture me, they'll have to do so in front of the entire city. And the guild can't ignore a public disturbance of that magnitude, Lily added, catching on to the strategy. They'd have to intervene, forcing Apollo to invoke proper procedures. It's still dangerous, Welf warned. What if they simply attack in force? They won't, Bell said with more confidence than he felt. Apollo wants to appear justified in his actions. A public brawl would damage his reputation among the other deities. The plan was set. They would attend the exhibition openly, inviting Apollo's response. Bell knew from his visions that this confrontation would lead to a formal war game, a contest between familias with specific rules that would give their small group a fighting chance. The next day, as they prepared to leave for the exhibition, Bell found himself alone with Hestia for a moment. Bellcun, she said quietly, how much of what's happening did you foresee? Bell hesitated. Some of it. The confrontation with Apollo, the war game, but details have changed because of actions I've taken based on what I saw. Hestia nodded thoughtfully. Your ability is remarkable, but also a burden. To see dangers coming but not be able to avoid them completely. It's not about avoiding every danger, Bell said, surprising himself with the wisdom in his words. It's about choosing which battles to fight and how to fight them. Hestia smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. You've grown so much in such a short time, Bellcun. Not just in status, but in heart and mind. I've had a good teacher, Bell said sincerely, covering her small hand with his own. The moment was interrupted by Welf calling that it was time to leave. Bell straightened his new armor, a lightweight but durable set crafted by Welf specifically for this confrontation, and checked the Hestia knife at his belt. Ready? He asked his goddess. Hestia nodded, her blue eyes bright with determination. Let's show Apollo that the Hestia Familia isn't to be underestimated. Together, they stepped out to face the future, not as Bell had first glimpsed it in his visions, but as they would shape it through their choices and courage. The Hephaestus Familia exhibition was held in one of Arario's largest plazas, with dozens of stalls displaying weapons and armor of extraordinary craftsmanship. Adventurers from every major familia crowded the space, examining the merchandise and placing orders for custom pieces. Bell, Hestia, Welf, and Lily moved through the exhibition as a tight group, aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. News of the church burning had spread quickly, and speculation about the conflict between Apollo and Hestia was rampant. There, Lily murmured, nodding discreetly toward a group of adventurers bearing Apollo's emblem. They've spotted us. Bell followed her gaze to see Hyacinthus and several of his elite fighters watching them intently. The Apollo Familia captain's hand rested on his sword hilt, his expression calculating. Good, Bell said quietly. Stay close to Hestia. Welf, be ready. They continued browsing the stalls, deliberately working their way toward the center of the plaza where the crowd was thickest. Bell recognized faces from his visions, members of the Loki Familia including Eyes, who gave him a subtle nod of acknowledgement, and representatives from other familias who would witness what was to come. When they reached the central demonstration area, where a smith was showing the properties of a newly forged blade, Bell positioned himself with his back to an open space, ensuring he couldn't be surrounded easily. It didn't take long for Apollo's people to make their move. Bellcranel, Hyacinthus called, his voice carrying across the plaza. Conversations died away as heads turned toward the confrontation. Lord Apollo requires your presence. I'm afraid I must decline, Bel replied clearly, his voice steady. My loyalty is to goddess Hestia and her familia. Hyacinthus' handsome face twisted in a sneer. Your goddess can't protect you. Our patience is at an end. You will come with us now, willingly or not. The Apollo familia adventurers began spreading out, creating a loose semicircle around Bel and his companions. The crowd backed away, recognizing the signs of impending conflict but too curious to disperse entirely. Is this how Apollo conducts business? Bel asked loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. Through intimidation and force. First burning our home, now threatening us in public, murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Many hadn't known about the church burning, and the revelation cast Apollo's actions in a negative light. Hyacinthus' eyes narrowed at the strategic revelation. Lord Apollo has made a generous offer for your transfer. Your stubborn goddess refuses to consider what's best for you. My goddess respects my choice, Bel countered. Something Apollo seems incapable of understanding. The tension in the air was palpable. Bel could see guild officials pushing through the crowd, drawn by the disturbance. This was proceeding exactly as he'd hoped, creating a public spectacle that would force Apollo to follow proper procedures. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the confrontation. How entertaining, Loki, the trickster goddess, sauntered into the open space between the two groups. Apollo's hunting a rabbit and the rabbit's showing teeth. I love it. Several other deities emerged from the crowd, drawn by the drama. Hephaestus with a disapproving frown, Freya watching with enigmatic interest. And finally, Apollo himself, his golden beauty marred by obvious irritation. This is a private matter between familias, Apollo stated coldly. Nothing's private when you burn down churches and threaten people in public squares, Loki countered cheerfully. Quite the spectacle you're making, Apollo. A guild official finally reached them, a stern-looking elf whom Bel recognized as a senior administrator. This disturbance must cease immediately, he declared. If there is a dispute between familias, there are proper channels. Indeed there are, Apollo conceded with a tight smile. Very well, I formally challenge the Hestia familia to a war game with bellcranel as the prize. The declaration sent fresh murmurs through the crowd. War games were rare events, usually between more established familias. For Apollo to challenge the tiny Hestia familia seemed disproportionate. I accept, Hestia declared before the guild official could respond, her small figure radiating dignity despite being dwarfed by the other deities. Under one condition, Apollo raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to set conditions. The guild's regulations state that the challenged party may set one reasonable condition, Hestia countered, clearly having studied the rules. Mine is simple. When we win, Apollo must vow never to pursue bellcranel or any future member of my familiar again. When you win, Apollo laughed incredulously. Your delusion is charming, Hestia. Very well, I accept your condition, pointless as it is. The guild official nodded, acknowledging the formal challenge and acceptance. The war game will be scheduled by the guild council. Both familias will be notified of the format and date within 3 days. As the official departed to report the development, the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement about the upcoming war game. Apollo's adventurers withdrew at a gesture from their god, though Hyacinthus cast one final threatening glance at Bel. Well played, Loki commented to Hestia with genuine admiration. You've turned Apollo's bullying into a public relations disaster for him. I'm just protecting what's mine, Hestia replied coolly. As the deities departed, Bel felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. This confrontation had gone according to plan, perhaps better than expected with the spontaneous intervention of Loki and the other deities. But the war game itself would be the true challenge. We did it, Welf said quietly as they left the plaza. Apollo can't touch us until the war game now. And we bought ourselves time to prepare, Lily added. Bel nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. His visions of the war game had been fragmented and uncertain, multiple possible outcomes depending on countless variables. In some, he had stood victorious. In others, defeat had seemed inevitable. The future was in flux, shaped by choices yet to be made. But one thing was certain, the real battle was just beginning. The guild announced the wargame format 3 days later, Castle Siege. Apollo's familia would defend a fortified position, while the Hestia familia attempted to defeat their captain or occupy the castle for a specified time. It was a format that heavily favored the defenders, especially given the massive numerical advantage Apollo enjoyed. They're not even pretending to be fair, Welf growled as they discussed the announcement in their safe house. Castle Siege with their numbers, it's practically unwinnable. Not unwinnable, Bell corrected thoughtfully. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. In his visions, he had seen multiple approaches to the castle, each with different outcomes. The frontal assault had always ended in failure, but there were other paths, infiltration routes, unexpected allies, and strategic advantages they could develop with proper preparation. We have 2 weeks before the war game, Hestia reminded them. We need to use that time wisely. First priority is recruitment, Bell said decisively. 3 of us against Apollo's entire familia isn't viable, no matter how well we strategize. Who would join us? Lily asked skeptically. Everyone knows we're facing impossible odds, Bell smiled. Not everyone makes decisions based on odds. Over the next few days, their small group grew incrementally. Lily officially transferred to the Hestia familia after a tense confrontation with Lord Soma that Bell had helped orchestrate, using his foreknowledge to ensure the god recognized her determination to leave. Welf formally received Hestia's blessing as well, his craftsmanship immediately strengthening their capabilities with specialized equipment. But the most surprising addition came from an unexpected quarter. Bell was returning from the guild, where he'd been studying maps of the region where Apollo's castle was located, when he noticed he was being followed. Instead of evading his pursuer, he deliberately turned into a quiet side street and waited. "You can come out now," he called softly. "I know you're there." A slender figure stepped from the shadows, the gray-haired elf waitress from the Hostess of Fertility. "Ryu Lion," Bell greeted her, not bothering to hide that he knew her name. "Bellcranel," she returned evenly. "You're more observant than most adventurers. And you're not just a waitress," Bell replied. "What can I do for you, Miss Lion?" Ryu studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. "The war game with Apollo has the entire city talking. Many are wagering on how quickly you'll be defeated." "And what do you think?" Bell asked. "I think you're planning something unexpected," Ryu said. "Your actions so far have been too calculated for someone supposedly outmatched." Bell smiled slightly. "Perhaps I simply refuse to accept defeat before the battle begins." "Perhaps," Ryu acknowledged. "Or perhaps you know something others don't." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I've watched you, Bellcranel. You move like someone who knows something will happen. You make decisions with unusual certainty for your experience level. You navigate danger as if guided by an unseen hand." Bell's smile faded. This was dangerous territory. "You have an active imagination, Miss Lion." "Do I?" Ryu challenged. "When you faced the irregular monster, witnesses reported you stabbed it precisely in its most vulnerable point, something even experienced adventurers wouldn't have known." Bell remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny her suspicions. After a moment, Ryu continued. "I don't know what your secret is, Bellcranel, but I recognize the look in your eyes. You're fighting for something worth protecting, regardless of the odds." "My familia," Bell confirmed simply. Ryu nodded. "I respect that." She seemed to come to a decision. "I want to help you in the war game." Of all the things Bell had expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. In his visions, Ryu had played a role in later adventures, but not in the conflict with Apollo. "Why?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because Apollo's tactics disgust me," Ryu said frankly. "Using his entire familia to hunt a single adventurer is dishonorable, and because," she hesitated, "because I see something in you worth supporting." Bell considered her offer carefully. Ryu Lion was powerful, a level 4 adventurer with exceptional combat skills. Her assistance would significantly improve their chances. "The guild might not allow it," he pointed out. "You're not a member of our familia. There are precedents for temporary alliances in war games," Ryu countered. "With proper registration as a supporter rather than a combatant, the guild will permit it." Bell realized she had researched this thoroughly before approaching him. "You're serious about this?" "I wouldn't offer otherwise," Ryu said simply. With Ryu's unexpected addition to their team, the Hestia familia's prospects improved dramatically. Though registered only as a supporter due to guild regulations, her combat experience and tactical knowledge became invaluable as they planned their approach to the castle siege. Their final recruitment came through Hestia herself, who returned from a meeting of deities with surprising news. "Take Mikazuchi has offered the assistance of his familia," she announced to the group gathered in their safe house. "Not as combatants, the guild wouldn't allow that many additions, but as trainers." "Take Mikazuchi familia specializes in Eastern martial arts," Ryu noted with approval. "Their techniques could be valuable against Apollo's Western-style fighters." For the remaining days before the war game, their preparation intensified. Bell trained relentlessly with Ryu and the Take Mikazuchi familia members, learning techniques to counter Hyacinthus' famous sword style. Well-forged specialized equipment, including armor with unexpected properties and weapons designed for the specific challenges of castle infiltration. Lily mastered new applications of her transformation magic that would prove crucial for their strategy. Throughout it all, Bell's visions continued to evolve, showing him glimpses of potential outcomes that shifted with each decision they made. The future remained uncertain, but their chances improved with each passing day. The night before they were to depart for the war game location, Bell stood alone on the rooftop of their safe house, watching the stars above Arario. His thoughts were interrupted by soft footsteps behind him. "Couldn't sleep?" Hestia asked, joining him at the railing. "Just thinking," Bell replied, smiling at his goddess. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. Bell shook his head. "No, whatever happens tomorrow, we've done everything we could to prepare. I believe in our team." Hestia studied him proudly. "You've changed since you first came to Arario Belcun, not just stronger, but wiser." "I've had to be," Bell said, thinking of the responsibility his foresight had placed on him. Seeing fragments of the future doesn't help if you don't have the wisdom to use that knowledge properly. "And what does your foresight show you about tomorrow?" Hestia asked hesitantly. Bell looked up at the stars, considering how to answer. "Possibilities," he said finally. "Some good, some bad, but I've learned that the future isn't fixed. Our choices matter more than any vision." Hestia slipped her small hand into his. "Then we'll choose victory, Belcun." Together, they watched the city lights below, preparing in their own ways for the battle that would determine their familia's future. The Castle Siege War game became the most-watched event in Arario's recent history. Magic-powered viewing crystals were set up throughout the city, allowing citizens to witness the battle in real time. Betting houses did record business, with odds heavily favoring the Apollo familia. Bell stood with his small team at their designated starting position, a hill overlooking Apollo's fortress. The stone castle was impressive, 3 tiers of defenses with archer positions and a moat surrounding the outer walls. From their vantage point, they could see Apollo's adventurers stationed at various defensive positions, with Hyacinthus likely commanding from the central keep. "Remember the plan," Bell said quietly to his companions. "Lily and Ryu will create the diversion at the main gate. Welf and I will use the underground approach we identified. We rendezvous at the inner courtyard." It was a strategy born from Bell's visions and refined through Ryu's tactical expertise, an approach that played to their strengths while minimizing Apollo's numerical advantage. "They'll expect some kind of subterfuge," Ryu cautioned. "Hyacinthus is arrogant but not stupid." "That's why the timing has to be perfect," Bell replied. "Lily, you're sure you can maintain the transformation for long enough?" Lily nodded confidently. "Thanks to Lady Hestia's updated blessing, my mind consumption is much lower now. I can hold it for the required time." With final nods of determination, they separated to their assigned positions. Welf and Bell circled wide around the castle, toward a dried streambed that Bell's visions had shown leading to an old drainage tunnel, a potential entry point that Apollo's familia might have overlooked. As they waited for Lily and Ryu's diversion to begin, Welf gave Bell a searching look. "You're awfully certain about this hidden entrance," the smith remarked. "Guild maps don't show it." "I have good sources," Bell replied evasively. Welf studied him for a moment longer, then shrugged. "You know, someday you'll have to tell me how you really knew about the irregular monster and Apollo's attack and this tunnel. But for now, I trust you." Bell felt a rush of gratitude for his friend's acceptance. "Thank you, Welf, that means a lot." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the castle's main gate. Right on schedule, Lily and Ryu had launched their diversion, and it was spectacular. Using her transformation magic, Lily had taken on the appearance of Bell himself, drawing the attention of Apollo's archers. Ryu, operating under the guise of a supporter, was using carefully timed wind magic to enhance Lily's movements, making her appear to have abilities beyond Bell's known capabilities. "That's our cue," Bell said as they watched Apollo's defenders rushing to reinforce the main gate. "Let's move." They located the drainage tunnel exactly where Bell's vision had shown it, partially concealed by years of overgrowth. It was narrow, barely wide enough for them to crawl through, but open all the way to an outlet in the castle's inner courtyard. "How did you know about this?" Welf whispered as they inched forward through the damp passage. "Dreams," Bell replied truthfully, if incompletely. Many of his visions came during sleep. The tunnel eventually opened into a grated drain in the castle's inner courtyard. As Bell had foreseen, the area was largely deserted, with most defenders drawn to the main gate where Lilias Bell was putting on an impressive show of agility and daring. "Wait!" Bell whispered, holding Welf back as they prepared to emerge. Guards passing. Sure enough, two Apollo Familia members hurried past their position moments later, heading toward the commotion at the gate. Once they were gone, Bell and Welf quickly removed the grate and slipped into the courtyard, taking cover behind a stack of supply crates. Phase 1 complete, Welf murmured. Now we wait for Lily and Ryu. According to their plan, after drawing sufficient attention, Lily and Ryu would retreat, leading pursuit away from the castle before doubling back to join Bell and Welf through a predetermined route. Bell closed his eyes briefly, trying to glimpse what was happening at the main gate. His visions came in fragments, Lily running, arrows flying, Ryu deflecting attacks with subtle wind magic. They were succeeding, but something was wrong. The pursuit was more organized than they had anticipated. Change of plans, Bell said suddenly, opening his eyes. Lily and Ryu are facing more resistance than expected. We need to create a secondary diversion. Welf raised an eyebrow but didn't question Bell's assessment. What did you have in mind? Bell pointed to the castle's inner keep, where Hyacinthus would be commanding the defense. We go straight for their captain. If we can draw him out, it will disrupt their entire command structure. It was a risky deviation from their original plan, but Bell's vision had shown Lily in potential danger if they didn't reduce the pressure on her and Ryu. Moving with the stealth Ryu had taught him, Bell led Welf toward the keep, using the shadows and structures of the courtyard for cover. They encountered two guards whom they quickly subdued with non-lethal strikes, binding and gagging them to prevent alarms. At the keep's entrance, Bell hesitated, another vision flashing before his eyes, Hyacinthus waiting inside, sword drawn, expecting them. He knows we're here, Bell whispered to Welf. Somehow he anticipated this approach. Welf frowned. Trap, Bell nodded, but we can use that. Are you ready? With a plan quickly formulated, Welf moved to a position beside the door while Bell stood directly in front. Taking a deep breath, Bell kicked the door open and stepped boldly into the keep's main hall. As his vision had shown, Hyacinthus was waiting, his legendary sword Alf Regina gleaming in the torchlight. The Apollo captain smiled coldly. Cranel, I'm almost impressed you made it this far. Your diversion at the gate was obvious, of course. Obvious enough to draw most of your forces away from the keep, Bell replied calmly, mentally counting how many guards remained with Hyacinthus. 6 fewer than he'd feared. Quality over quantity, Hyacinthus said dismissively. These 6 are enough to deal with you while your impersonator is captured at the gate. Bell didn't correct Hyacinthus' assumption that Lily was still outside. Instead, he drew the hestia knife, its blade catching the light. Shall we test that theory? Hyacinthus gestured, and his guards moved to surround Bell. But they had forgotten about Welf, who chose that moment to burst through the doorway, his newly forged greatsword sweeping in a wide arc that forced the guards to scatter. The battle erupted in earnest. Bell focused on Hyacinthus, knowing that defeating the captain would end the war game immediately. The level 3 swordsman was formidable, his technique polished by years of experience. But Bell had trained specifically for this confrontation, studying Hyacinthus' style through Ryu's knowledge and his own visions. Steel met steel as they exchanged blows, Hyacinthus' superior reach balanced by Bell's uncanny ability to anticipate his strikes. Meanwhile, Welf was holding his own against the guards, his crafted armor turning aside blows that should have wounded him. You've improved since the rumors began, Hyacinthus acknowledged as they separated after a flurry of exchanges. But you're still just a rookie with a fancy knife. Bell didn't waste breath responding. Instead, he focused on what his foresight was showing him, the pattern of Hyacinthus' legendary Alf Regina technique, a series of 7 consecutive strikes that few opponents could counter. It was coming. Bell could sense the captain preparing for his ultimate attack. When Hyacinthus launched the technique, Bell was ready. Rather than attempting to parry the impossibly fast strikes, he moved as Ryu had taught him, shifting his body just enough to let each blow pass by with millimeters to spare. It was a defensive technique that required perfect timing and absolute confidence, both of which Bell's foresight provided. Hyacinthus' eyes widened in shock as Bell evaded all 7 strikes, leaving the captain momentarily extended and off balance. In that crucial opening, Bell struck, not with the hestia knife but with a disarming technique Mikazuchi's familia had taught him. Alf Regina clattered to the stone floor, and before Hyacinthus could recover, the hestia knife was at his throat. Yield, Bell said quietly. The hall fell silent. Welf had managed to subdue or drive back the guards, though he bore several minor wounds from the encounter. Hyacinthus' face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is impossible. You're just a rabbit, Bell suggested, pressing the knife slightly closer. Yield, Hyacinthus, it's over. The captain's shoulders sagged in defeat. I yield, he spat bitterly. Throughout Arario, viewers watching through the magic crystals erupted in astonishment. The impossible had happened. The rookie adventurer had defeated Apollo's champion in direct combat, winning the war game against overwhelming odds. As the official announcement of Hestia Familia's victory echoed through the castle, Lily and Ryu finally arrived at the keep, both looking battered but triumphant. "You did it!" Lily exclaimed, her transformation magic released now that stealth was no longer necessary. "We did it," Belle corrected, including all of them in the victory. "Every one of us played a crucial role." As they gathered in the keep, now technically their property according to the wargame rules, Belle felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This victory had been different from what he'd initially foreseen, the path altered by their choices and adaptations along the way. The future wasn't a fixed destination, he realized, but a journey shaped by courage, friendship, and the willingness to face uncertainty with determination rather than fear. The aftermath of the war game transformed the Hestia Familia overnight. From an obscure group with a single notable adventurer, they became the talk of Arario, the ultimate underdogs who had defeated a major familia against impossible odds. True to the terms of the war game, Apollo was forced to relinquish all claims on Belle and provide reparations for the burned church. These reparations, combined with the castle they had won, gave the Hestia Familia something they had previously lacked. Resources. A week after their victory, the core members gathered in what was now officially Hestia Manor, the former Apollo castle renamed and repurposed as their headquarters. "Our financial situation has improved considerably," Lily reported, reviewing the ledgers with the meticulous attention to detail that made her an excellent treasurer. "Between Apollo's reparations and the reward from the guild for the irregular monster incident, we have sufficient funds to operate comfortably for at least a year. And recruitment requests are pouring in," Welf added. "Everyone wants to join the familia that defeated Apollo." Hestia nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need to be selective. Not everyone who wants to join will fit with our values." "Speaking of fitting," Belle said, turning to Ryu who sat quietly at the edge of their gathering. "Ryu, your help was invaluable in the war game. We'd be honored if you would consider officially joining the Hestia Familia." Ryu looked surprised by the formal invitation. "I appreciate the offer, Belle. But my situation is complicated," she hesitated. "There are aspects of my past that make joining a new familia difficult." Belle nodded understandingly. In his visions, he had glimpsed fragments of Ryu's tragic history with the Astria Familia, though the details remained unclear. "The invitation remains open whenever you're ready." As they continued discussing their future plans, Belle felt a familiar sensation, the blurring of his vision that preceded a significant foresight. The images came in rapid succession. A young man with the features of a cat folk challenging him to a duel, a festival erupting into chaos, and most vividly, a massive monster with multiple heads emerging from the dungeon depths. "Belle-kun," Hestia's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just thinking," Belle assured her, though his mind was racing with the implications of what he'd seen. The future continued to unfold before him, each challenge greater than the last. Later that evening, Belle stood on the manor's highest tower, watching the sunset over Arario. The city looked peaceful from this distance, though he knew that dangers lurked both within its walls and in the dungeon below. Soft footsteps announced Hestia's arrival. She joined him at the parapet, her small form dwarfed by the expansive view. "Copper for your thoughts?" she asked lightly. Belle smiled, "Just appreciating how far we've come. A few months ago I was a rookie with no familia, desperate for anyone to accept me. And now you're the hero who defeated Apollo's champion in single combat," Hestia said proudly. "Though I suspect there's more on your mind than reminiscing." Belle nodded, deciding to share what he had seen. "More challenges are coming, goddess. My visions are showing me new threats, new battles we'll need to face." "And will we win these battles?" Hestia asked. Belle considered the question carefully. "The outcomes aren't clear. My foresight shows possibilities, not certainties, but I believe we can face whatever comes, especially now that our familia is stronger." Hestia studied him with those ageless divine eyes that sometimes seemed to see right through him. "Your ability has changed you, Belle-kun. You carry the weight of potential futures on your shoulders." "It has," Belle acknowledged. "At first I thought seeing the future meant I could avoid all dangers, take shortcuts to becoming a hero. But I've learned that true heroism isn't about knowing what's coming, it's about facing it with courage and integrity, regardless of foreknowledge." "A wise perspective," Hestia said softly, "and one that makes me even prouder to have you as my familia." As darkness fell over Arario, Bell's thoughts turned to the challenges his visions had revealed. The catfolk challenger would come soon, Alan Fromel of the Freya familia, according to fragments of knowledge that accompanied the vision. The festival would follow, bringing chaos that would test their growing familia in new ways. But unlike when he first arrived in Arario, Bell no longer feared these glimpses of what might come. His ability to see the future wasn't a script to follow, but a guide to help him navigate the choices that would shape his destiny. Whatever challenges awaited, Bellcranel would face them not just with the power of foresight, but with the strength of the bonds he had formed and the courage he had discovered within himself, a courage that existed independent of knowing what was to come. The true power he had learned wasn't in seeing the future, but in having the heart to create a better one than fate had originally intended.